welcome to BABYMETAL.
Hello.
How many of you had heard of BABYMETAL before you came to this panel?
Yeah.
Thank goodness!
Outstanding.
That is a great start right there. So we can skip a lot of the basics because you already have the basics, right? Right?
I hope so.
Right? At least you have a passing knowledge or familiarity, and that is better than nothing, right? So, guys, let's introduce ourselves. Let's start here and go on down. I'm Beth. I'm the director of the track, and I found BABYMETAL 3 years ago after we started running all the K-pop stuff for MomoCon. So it was kind of a weird lead-in because that's not a natural. Well, I guess it's a fairly natural progression from K-pop to BABYMETAL, but it's such a different vibe that it feels like it's a totally different animal, right? But I love BABYMETAL. Anyway, these guys know way more than I do, so I'm going to ask them questions like I have no idea what's going on, and then, you know, we'll all get involved. So, on that line.
Hi, everybody. My name's Kevin. I'm a part of the BABYMETAL podcast. I found the group in 2016, just after Tokyo Dome, which is both awesome and a little disappointing because I didn't get a chance to go to Tokyo Dome because I was too late for that. But yeah, I've been following the band ever since. I'm one of those crazy bastards who likes to fly around and go to concerts when I really shouldn't.
I'm Paul. I'm also on the BABYMETAL podcast with Kevin. And actually, there's a third member of that podcast, Maggie, who couldn't be here. I've been sort of aware of BABYMETAL since I think it was basically around December 2017, around that time, late 2017. And you know, to the extent that you know BABYMETAL, you probably know something about how you can fall in pretty hard. But so, you know, I've flown across the country to see them play a show and things like that. I flew to Atlanta to do a panel. And so anyway, yeah, that's my story.
Hey, my name's AJ Hartley. I'm a novelist and a Shakespeare professor, among other things. And I sort of discovered BABYMETAL about 2016, around the same time Kevin did, but I didn't really sort of get actively involved in the fandom per se until I started making these little YouTube videos where I'd sort of walk through the songs and talk about I used to live in Japan, and so I would sort of explore the songs in the context of the lyrics and the culture and so on, and now I'm here.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So, where should we start?
Good question.
Should we start with what led
So,
to the beginning of BABYMETAL? I mean, there are so many places to begin.
So many places to begin.
At the beginning.
So I got to be honest up front. A win for me for this panel was like 10 people showing up. So all of you here is incredibly awesome.
You
Thanks
made
for showing
it,
up. I think you really did this. I'm from California and I flew in yesterday, so this was quite an adventure for me. So I really appreciate everybody being here.
Yay!
And you know, when we were talking about how to approach this, we didn't know how many people would come, and we didn't know what their familiarity with BABYMETAL would be. So we actually prepared sort of little potted history and little video clips and stuff like that. And we thought it might be fun to jumpstart the conversation by showing or reminding you of stuff that you have probably seen before as a way to sort of get us in the right mood and generating some discussion. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, so what you can see on the screen is, it's likely that this is going to be the thing that, if you've seen one thing, it is that, which is the video for Gimme Chocolate, which is what, 2014, I think?
Mm-hmm.
So,
This was the entry drug.
That was my first. I admit.
yeah. So we'll just play a little bit of it in case you somehow haven't seen it. This is the thing that we were talking about, but this of course was 2014. This was, and it's much later now in time.
Oh, yes.
It doesn't seem to be sound.
Okay.
Well, imagine, you know, metal music and.
Well, they're sorting that out. Who's seen them live?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
Outstanding.
That's a show of hands.
And someone's wearing a shirt of it.
Yeah, the Red Hot Chili Peppers concert they played at.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Where's everybody from? Are you guys all local? Did you guys travel? Mostly local?
3 hours wide.
3 out of 5.
Okay. Because I think they were here in 2018. We figured this out here? Tabernacle?
Yeah, they played it here twice. They played it twice.
Outstanding.
Coca-Cola Roxy. Yeah, Coca-Cola Roxy.
Oh, is that what it was? Okay, awesome. We've assimilated another panel, perhaps.
Every other panel in the building is going to be playing Baby Metal.
Yeah. Our backup plan, if nobody showed up, was just to play music really loud.
I have music here.
Now we've lost the video.
Okay, you remember what you saw before, right?
Okay,
That,
that's hilarious.
can you hear in the back? I think that's good enough.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway. So this is the 70-second clip of this, in case you didn't know what you were here for, or if you got dragged here by somebody.
Saying. Be prepared.
We've already proved 2020, so you
Yeah.
know we can.
That didn't happen. 2020 didn't happen.
No, it didn't. Completely didn't exist.
Didn't exist.
No.
But anyway, so
The video.
yeah, so that I guess is what a lot of people saw first, and I think that there's at least I believe that there is a kind of a story that people tell themselves when they see that. They think, oh, okay, there was a like a marketing committee, and they focus tested some weird Japan weird mashups, and they did a quick attempt for a money grab with a viral video. I know what this is all about. And the thing is, it's actually not at all about any of that. So that's kind of part of what we want to do, I think, is sort of tell you about why the band, or convince you that you also feel that the band is sort of deep enough and interesting enough to fly to Japan for concerts and stuff like that. There's something there to appreciate. So it's not, that wasn't just, well, actually we also just hit the 10th year, which is another bit of evidence of that.
Right.
They started in 2010, and they've spent this last year doing a 10-year anniversary events.
And we just can't wait, can we? We're just too loud.
I was like, now it's too loud.
Yeah. So, I don't know where we're
So I
supposed to
think,
go from there.
I remember certainly the first time I saw that video, and I think my response was like a lot of people's response, which is, what?
What?
Right.
What did I just watch?
What did I just see? What was that?
What is this?
Yeah.
And another thing when people say, this is the most Japanese thing I've ever seen in my life. And that sort of the combination of cute girls in sort of slightly odd costumes, an even odder statue behind them, and this sort of metal accompaniment singing about chocolate. And it feels like this sort of arbitrary mishmash of stuff that shouldn't go together but somehow does, right? And I think that, for me at least, that was the first appeal. And I remember the very first time watching the video, I'm thinking, okay. And then that chorus vocal comes in, and there's melody, and you can tell she can sing, and suddenly it's an entirely different thing, and you're like, wait a minute, this is legitimately good. It's not just quirk.
Right, it's not just a gimmick.
Goofy, right. There's something else here. And that was, as you said, as I'm sure you guys know, people who get into baby metal go down not the rabbit hole, but the foxhole. And as you go down the foxhole, you start to discover all these other things and the layers and so on that, for me, can constantly sort of say, this is a complex, rich, incredibly skilled, incredibly carefully put together art project, performance, music, the works, the full thing.
So who's responsible for putting them together? What other groups are they responsible for by comparison? Just so we have an idea of what kind of machine drove this.
Sure, yeah, so for anybody who's not aware, Baby Metal started as a subunit of an idol group for their parent company Amuse called Sakura. They call it a limited growth period group. It's young girls starting in the 5th and 6th grade of elementary school through when they turn 15 and they move from middle school and into high school. That's when they have to leave the group. And that's your traditional J-pop being cute. Non-traditional in the sense that a lot like Baby Metal, they treat their artists well. It's about the development of these young performers as artists and where they want to be in that industry. Without any of the pressure and sexualization that you normally see in J-pop, K-pop, things like that. And they have subunits. They want to try and target these young performers goals and their interests, what they align with. And their producer now, the guy who came up with it, who worked for Amuse at the time, had this idea of mashing metal with J-pop. And a vocalist had just joined Sakura Gakuen, Suzuka, who he thought would be perfect for this. So they started as a subunit of this group. So Sakura Gakuen would have a concert, they would go perform, and their first show was, Doki Doki Morning in front of 50 people in the middle of a concert completely unrelated to BABYMETAL. The idea of BABYMETAL hadn't existed at this point. And that's really how it kind of got off the ground. And as we know, it just started to kind of work. People really latched onto the idea of this. The music was interesting. It was more than just a gimmick. And it's really the only group to come out of this subunit of Sakura Gakuen who's been successful internationally, who's toured, who's done things, and grown above where they started.
Yeah. Actually, maybe I can do. I wonder if I can do this without having it be loud. This is them. I'll try to talk while this is playing. But this is Sakura Gakuen as a unit. It's usually 10 or 12 girls that are in up before high school. And so the third person to sing is the lead singer of BABYMETAL. I will highlight that in a second. But so this subunit was actually one of several subunits. So there was also BABYMETAL was the heavy metal club, but there was also the cooking club and the newspaper club,
Baton twirling,
the baton club. There was
tennis,
the wrestlers
club,
enthusiasts club. So these are all like little subgroups. And the idea was basically just to give them some performance training in a small group, right? And so all of this is largely sort of like the talent agency. Sort of. Oops, okay. Well, I guess it's just going to keep going.
That's what it was like if you attended the Sakura Gakuen concert and BABYMETAL had to perform. You went from that, to something like this.
Even though this was an accident, let me just say what this is that started, and maybe we can talk a little bit about it because that's also useful. This is Kevin was at this concert actually. This is Legend Metal Galaxy. This was 2020.
2020, January 2020. Yeah.
So this is that that same group much later. They're still going. This is a much different kind of song from the other ones. But actually, that's one thing that we'll talk about, I'm sure, is that each song you can say is a much different kind of song than the other ones because they're all different from each other. But this is the only one that's in sort of this style. It's called. You'll know what it's called. This song is called BMC.
So, I want to bring up again, this is a great time, because we just watched a little bit of Sakura Gakuen, to bring up that, that there is something there. And I think a lot of people have this journey. Everybody I've talked to in this fandom has kind of gone on a similar journey or has a variation of this story. You see the Gimme Chocolate video on YouTube when it went viral, or as part of something else. For me, I saw 4 seconds of Gimme Chocolate when they opened for Metallica. I come from metal, and I was following their tour in South Korea, and they showed 4 seconds of their opening acts, one of them being BABYMETAL, and I was like, what the is that? and I started Googling around to figure out what it was. And you go on this journey, you're like, okay, I don't know if I like these 3 girls singing and dancing things I don't understand. And then the more you listen to it, it's like, okay, the musicianship here, the music is extremely well produced and performed. Like, some of the best musicians in the world, play this stuff. So you latch onto that. It's like, okay, this is awesome. I can get into the metal, but I still don't know if I really like, the vocals on top of this and the girls dancing. That's kind of weird. But then you keep going and you keep researching, keep watching stuff. Then you see something live, right? I didn't cross this line until I stumbled across live footage on YouTube. Of a concert, for example, Road to Resistance at like Sonosphere, and you see the circle pit open up throughout the crowd, and you see a few thousand people who are like, okay, now I feel validated really liking this, and I buy off on it, and now I'm in the whole package, right? Now I love the vocals. Now I know it's not just a gimmick, and I'm sold on the idea of having the dichotomy of 3 little Japanese girls singing on top of this brutal, well-performed metal music, and. Am I in the ballpark? Do some of you who have gone kind of gone on this journey, right, in kind of the same path? And like a lot of things in life, I find that really unifying. This fandom, this group, every time I go to a concert, is one of the most receptive. It's like being at a con. We were talking about this earlier. It's like being at a con. You know, what brings you together? It's this, you know, you feel accepted, you feel safe to talk about it with other people, and everybody's so inviting and welcoming, and that's also one of the things that's really drawn me to this group. And you know, I'm flying across the country to talk about it.
Yeah, and I guess one other thing that sort of shows up a little bit in this video is I can never keep myself from talking about this a little bit, but there's an undercurrent of comedy to this band that I think is that is perfect. I mean, because the whole thing from the outset, it was really, if you imagine like a little kid performing to the relatives in the living room, you know, they're playing a metal song or whatever. This is what's in their head. Right? That's kind of what the project is. It's like imagining what a little kid thinks they're doing.
Yeah.
And so this thing that we just showed, it's a BMC, which stands for Baby Metal Cipher, which is basically, it's like a metal version of a rap battle.
Right.
So it's a lot of sort of nonsense words said in a sort of, cadence with a metal background. But some of the words that go by are things like, whatchamacallit, you know? I mean, like, clearly there's comedy in there, you know, it's just saying words.
And the other thing I would say, you know, with a song like that, especially following the Gimme Chocolate or the Sakura piece, is that central to what this band is, as well as the hybridity, is the flexibility and the willingness to experiment.
Got it.
That, you know, when you listen to albums in sequence, you can feel the kind of experimentation as they say, okay, what if we go in this direction then? What if we try this kind of music? What if we add these elements? And particularly with the last album, with Metal Galaxy, this sort of conceit of let's explore music from other cultures. Let's add an Indian element. Let's add a Thai element. Let's add, right? And sort of deliberately, let's add a Latin element and see where that takes us. And somewhat remarkably, it doesn't stop the song from sounding like Baby Metal.
Right. I appreciate that they are consistent in their performance even when they change theme.
Yeah.
Right? Like they still have they bring a character attitude to every character they're playing in each one.
Yeah.
But they're still very consistently the same types of characters from song to song, and I really appreciate that they are able to play within that.
Yeah.
And that every single one is special, unique, and has meaning.
Yeah.
Like it's nothing is there for no reason.
And it keeps the audience on the toes, right? Because you literally don't know what's going to happen next.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah.
You wait for the next song. It's like, I don't know what this is going to be. And the other thing I was going to say as far as the international influences on the music is that it's done with great seriousness and sensitivity. And that it doesn't to me feel gimmicky when we say, okay, we're going to incorporate these Indian components. And that's going to affect the instrumentation. We're going to have the sitar front loaded. We're going to have it changes the vocal style as well as the lyrical content and stuff. And it's like it feels like a genuine homage to other places brought into a Baby Metal song. You know?
Yeah.
But that was something. One of the so I don't think we've named him yet, but the person whose kind of brainchild this is Kei Kobayashi. Kobayashi. I said it right the first time.
You said it right the first time.
And Koba is what he's known as, Koba Metal. But and you know he's talked in various interviews about kind of like how this project worked, and he is really deep in the creative end of all of this stuff, and like this is basically his project. But you know he's talked about these collaborations that happen. This third album has a lot of collaborations with other artists, and you know he was sort of amazed. Actually, it's funny like seeing him recount how he came about these, because it's always like he went to the artist website on the contact form and emailed them with Google Translate, you know. But the thing is that you know somehow the artists understood, like nobody turned him down, according to him. That the artists sort of understood this was honest, you know, this was serious. This was respectful. They really wanted their participation, and so they got the lead singer of Sabaton, and they got Olivia, and you know they got all these people to join in. So the other musicians recognized the seriousness of this.
Okay, so what do you want to know
Yeah.
about baby metal?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good place. to
Right.
start. Does anyone
Let-
actually have a question?
Does anyone have a question about anything in particular, or do we just want to keep playing videos and talking about how cool they are? Because we can do that. We have clips.
Or an observation or a thought.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
you first.
You said you had a YouTube video where you discussed the songs and everything?
Yeah.
What channel? What's the name of your YouTube channel?
I think it's just Andrew Hartley, right?
I believe it is.
I think it is.
AJ, I think it's AJ.
It might be
I always
AJ
go
Hartley.
by AJ Hartley, but actually
Is it Andrew on YouTube?
I think it's Andrew
I don't
Hartley.
have my phone to
on YouTube.
check. Yeah, I believe it's Andrew
Yeah,
Hartley.
And I
definitely
think
check it
at
out.
this point I've done about 25 songs,
Yeah.
sort of just, and some of them are like 20 minutes, and some of them are like an hour
His
and a half.
intro is pretty funny, y'all. It's like, hi, old white guy here to talk about baby metal. It's fantastic.
Almost always they start out with, oh, I don't have much to say, and then, you know.
And then he goes for an hour and a half.
Yeah, 45 minutes later.
But the other thing that actually is really good about AJ's videos is that at least in some of these later ones with the collaborations, he's brought in other experts in, you know, what was it, like Celtic metal or Indian music or whatever, you know, to try to talk about the connections that are being made with the different songs.
And that was partly because, especially with songs like Shanty Shanty, I didn't want to be the person saying, this is not appropriative. Right? I would
Right.
rather have, you know, Indian
Yeah.
people on with me talking about music and explaining and having them steer me through and say, no, it's not appropriative, and here's why not. And I'm like, okay, good.
Right, fantastic. Your question?
Yeah, having a brain fart of like who's who and baby metal.
Yeah.
I know one of the original members had to drop out due to health issues.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed like in the latest official like DNC video, there's only 2 members. Is that the official state going forward? That baby metal is
I have
What-
not
Rubber
seen
band
an
or-
announcement either way, whether they intend to replace her or not. But in theory, because the triad works so well, they probably will try to recruit someone if she's not able to come back.
I mean,
But
That's a
the
really
other
complicated
two,
question.
The other two probably have a whole lot to say about it and may not want to work
You
with
see us
anyone else.
exploding here?
So this is all theory because they made no announcement either way.
right.
Yeah.
but officially the band is Sue and Moa.
Yeah, yeah.
Too,
Officially.
officially.
So Sue being Sue Metal, the lead singer, and Mo being Mo Metal. These are characters in a sense, you know. So Sue
Right.
Metal is the one we've been watching videos of,
Mhm.
played by Suzuka Nakamoto.
Yeah.
Right. And Mo Metal is played by Mo Kikuchi. And you know, up until 2017, basically, there was Yui Metal, played by Yui Mizuno. And there was a concert in late 2017, basically when I started paying attention, that she suddenly couldn't be at. And you know, they don't explain this, and it's a health thing probably, and you know, it's not really we don't need to know. All we know is that she's not there and couldn't be there. They are not really very good at communicating. I mean, you know, possibly intentionally, but they don't tell you. Like so the next show after the one she didn't show up for was in Kansas City in the U.S. tour at the beginning of the U.S. tour, and nobody knew until they hit the stage that Yui wasn't going to be there. You know, something like they don't make announcements like that. But there was an evolution. I don't know if I want to be the only one talking about this, but anyway. But in 2018 when they did that, they showed up with just Sue and Moa Metal, and then two sort of professional backup dancers. So there were 4 people on the stage, and they did that for a while, and with one exception, and then they came back. I think it was in the Australian tours with 3. And the way that well, and actually even that was different. That was just a new third person that nobody knew. And the current state just ended is basically that third spot is it's occupied by a support dancer, and that support dancer is one of 3 people, never actually named in person, but everybody knows who they are. This actually Copa Metal is big on pro wrestling, so this is really very like pro wrestling. You know, people having characters and being anonymous for play, even though everybody actually knows who they are. But so we know who these 3 Avengers are who are doing the support role. But that's basically it. You know, like essentially it's just one of these 3 filling that third spot to make the triangle. So
Yeah. And this could all likely change in a month. The most recent news we have is the last 10 years is done October 10th, and we have no news after that. The announcement included the kanji for basically the word sealed or closed. So there's lots of speculation going on. Are they going to continue? Are they not going to continue? What's the new iteration going to look like? I think we all pretty firmly believe that it doesn't make business sense for them to shut the group down on October 10th after just celebrating 10 years and actually being successful internationally. So really complicated time to ask that question because who knows? It's all going to change here in a month.
10/10 for their 10th anniversary.
Yeah.
Gee, somebody just planned on that one.
Well, it was supposed to happen last year, but
I
COVID.
mean, you can imagine that they believe that they've accomplished what they set out to do.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, I think as I was sort of mentioning at the beginning, this was not the plan from the outset. I mean, the plan at the outset was to have some funny thing to do, after the newspaper club and before the baton club. There's also, they definitely make it sound like, oh no, it's going to end, because that's what they love to do. They've been doing that throughout. It's always been, is this the end? Is this the end? Is it going to be over?
But that's that sort of that apocalyptic lore that has always been built around the band.
Yes.
The official pronouncement it's always done in it feels like Lord of the Rings or something, right? That each chapter is somehow grandiose and epic and contextualized in this sort of fantasy way. So, and people get frustrated because like, yes, but what does that mean? what is actually going to happen? And we just don't really know. I mean, as Kevin says, I think they'll be back. Whether they'll have a new permanent third member, whether they're going to be doing radically different kinds of music, I don't know. But as I said, that's part of the fun of it.
Absolutely.
Because, they are nothing but a walking curveball. And you never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, I think that's really the appeal.
Yeah. I was kind of wondering, and maybe this is just like more like personal experiences from your side, but like, since baby metal tends to be like such a deviation from what we traditionally think of like the metal sphere, I was just kind of wondering like how that process over time got more and more accepted into that sphere. Because at least at the very beginning, people do see it kind of as a gimmick, and especially in the metal community, which tends to like put so much priority in like technicality, but also like harsh growls and like that stronger feeling to it. It feels like it felt a little bit rejected, but the more I see it, more people get into it. So maybe a little bit of like your experience with that.
Yeah, I think my experience with that is, traditional metalheads. I was a metalhead before a baby metal fan, and that community is very much a gatekeeping community. That's not metal. This can't be metal. Just because I don't understand it or it sounds different from what I'm used to. So it can't exist. I don't accept it. This is a gimmick. Get it out of my face. On the flip side of that, you see as they have been touring and interacting with, groups like Metallica, Trivium, all these other, huge musicians in the metal community and just music in general, you can see their acceptance growing. Was it Rob Zombie?
Yes.
Rob Zombie's famously defended that. He went so far on his personal Facebook and said to his metal elite fans, well, hey, what have you done? Are you on stage performing metal? How can you say this?
And Judas Priest.
Judas Priest, yeah, Rob Halford has done the same thing.
Saying this is the future.
Yeah. So I think the music community has embraced this because at the end of the day they're all artists. Sure they're all making millions of dollars and out touring doing this thing, but they recognize that this is in fact an art project, and it's successful. It works. Maybe it shouldn't work, but that's what's fun, and I think that's why it works. I think that's why it works.
And I think it's because it makes you stop and think. It makes you go, what was that? It's because you have to know. Once you see it, you have to know, what was that?
Yeah.
So I think, that's a big part of it is the what?
I think there's also a sort of, that we're living in a unique technological moment. That I think part of the issue with the acceptance also is that one of the things that people who rejected baby metal initially were saying, well, they're not a real band. They're not writing their own songs and doing all the instrumental work themselves. They're not living in mom's garage waiting to make their first recording. But who is, right? And I was listening to an interview with Tim Henson, one of the Polyphia guys, and a couple of other metal musicians, and they're all saying, we're composing on our laptops. We're building stuff and we don't know where it's going, but because the technology is allowing us to do these things, and then we'll figure out how to play it live. And then we'll sort of construct a more organic version of it. But the composing is being done digitally and through technology. And I think as people get used to that idea, something like this will seem less of an outlier and more of, you know, we have the means to make our own music, and here's an extraordinary example of people doing exactly that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I might actually just add on to that too that BABYMETAL, the guy whose our project this is, or at least he runs everything. There's so many people involved in this project, and the professional choreographers and professional composers and musicians and so forth. But he's been philosophizing a fair amount over these years about like what constitutes metal, what metal is, what is metal, what isn't metal. He's actually about to release a book of essays about this, but I think he makes a fairly decent case as he goes through this. This is as much metal as anything, you know, that it's doing the same kind of things that the metal subgenres do. So,
you know, versions of this conversation have been around as long as pop music in any form has been around, right? You know, one of my favorite British bands from the late 70s, early 80s is XTC. And you know, Andy Partridge being asked, you know, oh well, you're, you know, got this sort of new project and it's got some funk elements and it's got a little post-punk, new wave, blah blah blah. And so he made a point of making the next single, and it's called "This Is Pop." and it's like, I'm not interested in fighting over the nuances, over what this sort of weird purist idea of what constitutes the correct form of this music. It's like, if the music works, it works. And as you said, there's a sort of gatekeeper mentality that is ultimately very conservative. And it's a way of excluding people and, do I want to say this publicly? The fact that this is a band of Japanese women, you telling me that's not a factor? And some of these people wanting to not include it?
Absolutely. How long did it take for Nervosa to be accepted? And you know, like, and they are as metal gets, and it took them years to be widely popular because of that whole gatekeeping, like you said. There's a lot of this is dudes, and I think the more that you get more dude fans who happen to identify as she/hers, it expands who you want to see on stage too, right?
And the irony of this is all those people gatekeeping this genre went through the same thing. Metal went through the same exact thing when it, you know,
when it spurred off.
When it really started to take off in the late 70s, early 80s. It was the fringe music that wasn't accepted by everybody.
What are you saying?
So now, you know, now they're gatekeeping their own genre.
It's too loud.
Because they've got old.
Because you're sure.
The music's too loud. You're too old. Any more questions? Comments? Who?
I'd love to hear if you have a favorite song.
I don't want to go first.
Okay.
That's a hard question.
It is a hard question, and you know, if you asked me tomorrow, I would come up with something different. But I sort of circle back around, you know, and I'll listen to one album a lot, and then it'll become a little familiar, and I'll go back. You know, when I was driving down from Charlotte, and I finally got my damn music player working in the car, and just by pure alphabet, because of the way the system thing, the first song to come up was "I Can't Speak." Man, I love that song. And to me, and the thing that makes the song work is that it really showcases Sue's vocals, and then it has those sort of dueling guitar solos that are just extraordinarily balanced and intricate in the way that they're sort of playing thirds together, you know, the back and forth, speaking to each other, you know, that and Headbanger, again, the way that especially after the musical break, when she comes back through after the dance scene, all that stuff, oh man, what about karate? I can't do this! Too many good So, but the ones that I love most are the ones where there's some point where the voice lifts the emotional register of the song and hits that note, and you suddenly believe everything she's talking about, and it feels electrifying, and then like hair's going weird on my arms, and I'm just thinking about it.
Yeah.
That's Baby Metal. I will now shut up.
I do actually honestly, like, people do ask me this question sometimes, and I do often say, the one that's playing right now. That's the answer to that. You know, probably karate got me in originally. I would say, maybe recently I would have Yava. I'll say Yava.
Huh.
I think that is a very complex song.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's really funny how that question changes from hour to hour. I think the best way to answer it is, you know, like how Paul said, whatever's on right now. And I also think about, when I think about what my favorite song is, you know, I'm one of those people who likes to connect, you know, music to experience. I've been really lucky to be able to travel and see this group all over the world. My first time seeing them in Japan was last year for Legend M and that series of concerts. So I have to say Shine for me, just because of that performance, and I'm connected to the memory.
Right, yeah.
You know, nobody really knew that was coming. You know, nobody had heard that song before, and it's the only time they've performed as a duo, as a duet, and that was a really special moment. I've never seen more grown Japanese men break down crying after a and I'm not ashamed to admit that I was one of them. Except not the Japanese.
Just to maybe clarify about that, the Legend M was actually the concert that was sort of specifically about Moa Metal's 20th birthday, which is the age of adulthood. So that was celebrating, you know, Moa's time, and so in a sense that, you know, she got a much bigger role in that one song as well.
Yeah, she played the guitar on stage.
Yeah.
You know, dancing around a duet. It was just an incredible moment. And, you know, this is a good segue into wanting to talk about the production. You know, you can talk all you want about the music, but it's theater.
Yeah.
You know, their productions are more than a concert. It's musical theater. They tell a story, they tell it well, and they're not afraid to spend money to tell that story. And it's quite a production. It's really incredible.
And I think in a way that actually speaks to your previous question as well. That a lot of metal fans are like, no, it should be just guys, you know, up on stage with cigarettes and
You're
a
not
pint
playing
of
in a
beer,
grungy basement.
wandering their way through crappy versions of the album. You know, it's like, and then what you get is this high production piece of musical theater, and they're like, wait, what? This isn't metal. It's like, no, this is better metal.
New and improved metal.
But then again, there's always, like, you know, Kiss or whatever, like, you know, Iron Maiden, or, you know, all of these shows, they are big and epic and, you know, full of props. I mean, that's what all the baby metal stuff is modeled on, actually. So.
I like how the questions keep coming back around to me. What's our next video?
Yeah, let's play a video.
Okay, let's see. What seems like a good idea?
What you got?
We have Nagitsune, which
Oh, yes. We haven't even mentioned that.
yeah,
I know.
There's a lot of interesting textual stuff here. This is 2012, I think.
So
much.
So
I could watch it all day.
I want to hear from AJ here, because you've done a video on this song, and what in particular is unique and special about, you know, the last minute of what we just watched?
Oh, you mean the Sakura
Yes.
stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, so embedded in the center of the song, when it sort of goes down to half speed, and the fan dancer comes out, the fan dancer who's played by Mikiko, the choreographer, in this video, and they sing kitsune, kitsune, watashi wa megitsune, kitsune meaning fox, megitsune meaning the vixen, female fox, right? But the song, the melody line there is an old traditional Japanese folk song called Sakura Sakura, which is about the cherry blossom. And the cherry blossom is a conventionally feminine image in Japan, and this is a song very much about Japanese femininity. And but the rejection of the cherry blossom as the motif and the embracing of this figure from Japanese mythology, the shapeshifter, the figure of power in the fox. But it's also interesting because, of course, Sakura Gakuen is the training school that they came from, so that the use of the song is also an indicator of a movement away from their childhood origins into this more sort of complex and powerful version of femininity, I think.
I love how every time we talk about this, I learn more from these guys than I knew the last time we talked about it. Like, the series of emails, they apologized for including me in the series of emails where they were discussing what we were going to talk about for the panel, right? And I'm like, no, you have no idea how much I've learned in the last week. Oh my gosh, I didn't know half of this. I'm like, what if we talked about these things? I'm like, I didn't know that. So I'm going to sit over here and ask questions because I didn't know that. I'm like, oh, wow, you guys have done like a seriously deep dive. I'm so impressed with the depth of knowledge that you have about this group. So we've got 15 minutes left.
But not in a creepy way.
We've got 15 minutes left. Do we want to give out some stickers? Do we want to
All that stuff, yeah.
do more
I'd love to hear
quick Q&A?
Yeah, I'd love to hear more from you guys.
I'd love to hear more from the audience about the things that you like.
So I first started listening to BABYMETAL. I was like, it took me about 10 minutes after Gimme Chocolate got released. I'm just, all right, cool, rabbit hole, let's go, foxhole, let's go. So like I remember when Metal Resistance came out, and the song that really got me was No Rain, No Rainbow. Just was that sudden change of just we're slowing this down right now. Is there anything cool like specifically you know about that song or the video or anything? Because that's probably my favorite one.
No Rain, No Rainbow?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking.
Yeah, we were talking about that.
We're always talking about. And I mean, No Rain, No Rainbow. It's one of those. A lot of BABYMETAL songs are structured so that the content is more ambiguous than this, right?
Yeah.
That particularly those sort of quasi-relationship-centered songs like No Rain, No Rainbow or Akatsuki, the sort of power ballady kind of songs. But it's something about the way the Japanese language works often is that you tend to omit pronouns, right? So that when you try to translate the song, the impulse in English is to insert a lot of I and you or he and she and stuff in ways that it's not there in the song. So the song's really interesting because it creates this sort of moment of No Rain, No Rainbow is a very melancholy song, a very sad song. The title has that sort of hint that you have to kind of experience the sadness in order to sort of experience life and intensity of experience generally and the possibility of good things. But it's very much an exploration of very sort of feelings of loss and depression, right? But the framework of it is very unspecific, so that when you try to sort of put yourself into it, I think the way a lot of these songs are structured is that they are deliberately built to be ambiguous, so that you can say, oh, this reminds me of X in my own life. And you can put yourself in the song and you can frame it in a way that completely suits your feelings or your experience. And the song itself remains then sort of strangely open to association. And I think this is a very BABYMETAL thing, right? That the name of the fan base and the band simultaneously is the One, right? On my shirt here. And the idea of the One is that it's all of us together, that we're all sort of sharing this experience, and that the songs are constructed so that you can put yourself in them, right? And bring whatever personal baggage or specificity you have, and the song will work in that context. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. That's one of the things that drew me to it. I first, like I mentioned, the metal is incredible. Instrumentals, some of the best in the world. But when I really kind of thought on the foxhole and looks, I now speak very poor Japanese. The more I drink, the better it gets. But I started to look up. Okay, I want to know what these songs are, what they mean, and like AJ said, well, that's really hard to do because the Japanese language is pretty ambiguous, and when you try and translate it, it doesn't work. And then you add a layer of, well, now this is music, and even music lyrics generally, even in English, are up for interpretation, right? You don't always necessarily know So there's a whole other layer of that, which I find really interesting once you start diving into what these songs are written about.
Right.
And they explore a lot of things you wouldn't expect from what you hear.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
'Cause it's
because
not
it sounds so happy and
Everything
upbeat.
sounds right.
Right, but I mean, like we all know that karate, the figure in back in the white is death, right? So it's a song about death, and they're just and it's like it's so discordant. Again, it's one of those things where it's so discordant. The visuals, the theme, and what you hear, that your brain goes, wait, okay, what was that again? Because every time you get something from them, it's a brand new. Wait, what was that? Every single time, because everything is different.
I think the
That's
karate.
why I love them. It's always,
Karate's a
wait,
really
what was
good.
that?
Karate's a really good example of another one of those baby metal themes.
Mhm.
That they often sing about struggle, right? They sing about facing adversity and the impulse to fight on and support each other, right? And unlike the Western sort of narrative model, there's not necessarily success at the end, right? It's not about just keep going and everything will be great. No, it's just keep going.
Yeah.
Because that's life, right? And karate, maybe we could watch the karate one.
Yeah, I think this
Because
is
it's very much about mutual support and
It's a good one that plays out on
So this is actually a performance and not the video, but I think this works well too.
Yeah.
It just makes me miss concerts.
But it is really a song about persevering.
Yeah.
It's persistence.
Oh, and this brings up another thing I wanted to talk about. Can we talk about costuming choices?
Sure.
Yeah. So I mean, like we've definitely seen, you've seen like the little kid versions, and we've seen a little bit when they did BMC of the sort of modern version. There was a time in between when they were doing this before that they looked like this, which is also an interesting and quite different. But still has this, the shape that works for the dance, right? I'll stop it there just because we're so long time. But what kinds of things were you thinking about?
Okay, so the Lolita style in Japanese culture, in and of itself, is kind of a women's empowerment movement in Japan, right? They're taking back their sexuality by under-sexualizing themselves by dressing like little girls, right? So they're making themselves unattractive to possible suitors by making themselves look too young to be interesting, right? So the Lolita movement is totally a women's empowerment thing. They take it one step further by going totally goth with it, right? And then by the time we get to karate, you see that it's almost like a military style uniform. And I know AJ talked about this in his video about this video.
The armor and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so there's always an evolution of the style, but it's very, very much an empowerment thing, I think, in their costume choices.
I think with them, I think that, one of the issues with that sort of kawaii Lolita style stuff is that in pushing away from conventional sexuality, there's an impulse to infantilization, which is also problematic. And that one of the things I like about baby metal is that they're able to resist that. And that's also the subject matter of the song. So
Right, and I think by taking it more towards the goth direction, it definitely takes it away from the infantilization, like you said. Like it makes it not as great. It's very a hard version of it.
Yeah,
Everything they do is the hard version.
Even when I was on the podcast that time, we talked about one of the lyrics that initially really got me excited about the band was in Doki Doki Morning, where that line is should I know, could I? I hate pretending not to know.
Yeah.
And that's the anti-infantilization. So that to be cute, I have to be dumb. And I hate that.
Yeah.
And that to me, I was like, oh wait, that's interesting.
Yeah. They also do use their costuming for theming to tell their story, which is, and this is a perfect slide to be on.
Right, because it helps pull out the character.
Right, well, so it brings out the character, and what they were doing is they were transitioning into what we see now. they took their time and did it over 2 years. So they had this battle armor where they went to their dark side lore. This was Baby Metal being dark and not as happy anymore. Do you have the Australia or the like? You know what I'm talking about? The next costume.
Oh, I don't.
Yeah. So from this armor, they went to basically what they'd worn before, but they made it look like the tutus had been like burned and destroyed, right? And then they went away. We didn't see them for a few months, and then they come back for Legend M and The Sun Also Rises. You know, after it was about a 6-month hiatus or so, into what they're wearing now, right? And so they had to use their costume to kind of tell their story and drive their narrative of, you know, we're fighting for, you know, what we believe in here. We're destroying what it was in the past, and we're rising again with this new look.
That was a really good answer. See, I'm glad I asked about costume. All right, last 5 minutes. One more question. No more questions. Yeah.
I just wanted to know what your podcast is called and where I can listen to it.
Oh.
The Baby Metal Podcast. We have stickers.
Okay, coincidentally.
I'm gonna stay.
The name is great.
In the back.
Kind of piggybacking off the favorite song question, I hope this isn't too difficult and it doesn't
Sure.
take too long. But I feel like all good music you connect with emotionally. So maybe your favorite song or that point where you're like, oh, this sounds good, listen to another song. But then the emotion you felt where you were like, no, this is pretty rad shit. Like, this is dope. I'm really glad I'm listening to this. Is there maybe like a general emotion you were feeling or?
The one for me, just because I think the message is great. I didn't go to concerts. Concerts weren't my thing until I discovered Baby Metal. And I, on a whim, drove to LA because they were in town, and that was the next time I could see them live. I didn't know anybody, but I'd interacted with people online, and I met some friends down there I'd met online to watch this concert. And I remember crying at the end when they finished with the one because I finally felt like I was a fan. You know, I felt like I'd been indoctrinated, you know, and it's weird to think about that and say that out loud, but that's when it became kind of real for me. So yeah, I think the one, just because of that moment, you know, because what other group does that? What other group tries to bring their fans together in that kind of meaningful way? And that song embodies that for me.
I mean, I would probably go back to karate. That last hashira gets me every time, you know, and I'm just like, turn off the cameras. I'm not going to acknowledge it. I failed masculine.
Yeah, I would say that too. Like, I mean, anyone who knows karate well will know that moment in that song.
Yeah.
And it works every time. I think, you know, that's the other thing is that the variance that they have among these songs really does make it possible to keep listening to them. I mean, like, I've listened to some other things, but mostly I've listened to Baby Metal since 2017. You know, and it's fine, and I still do.
Yeah.
You know, because the songs are different enough; they fill all the niches.
Could we maybe suggest some other bands to listen to?
Absolutely. Band suggestions are usually welcome among music fans.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about before about, you know, what the sort of, as well as going down the foxhole for Baby Metal, it's led me to other bands that I probably wouldn't have found otherwise. And my two favorite Japanese bands at the moment, other than Baby Metal, are Polka Dot Stingray, who are kind of a more conventional indie rock act, very sort of jazz influenced parts of it, extraordinary instrumental works, not a metal band at all, but they're great, check them out. And Atarashi Gakko, who are 4 girls who also kind of come out of this sort of idol context, but are doing really, really interesting, adventurous things. And I think they're going to make it big in the US. They've just sort of signed with 88 Rising. They're starting doing stuff on the West Coast. And they also have a really jazzy, the first 2 albums are heavily jazz influenced, and now they're doing a lot more sort of dance music and stuff, but smart, funny, interesting. Atarashi Gakko, new school leaders, they're cool.
A lot of people gravitate to Bandmade. That's kind of the natural progression after Baby Metal once they find that. Yeah, some Bandmade fans out there. Yeah, Passcode's also really good. Silent Siren. That's also in the rock genre. Man, I can go on. I just went hard kind of on Japanese music once I did baby metal. So if you want to talk about that, we'll be around after the panel for sure.
Maybe there's some comfortable seats right out there.
Yeah.
You can just sit and chat.
Actually, for me, it wasn't so much that, but baby metal got me back into sort of appreciating music, and the people they connected with worked for me. So like I wouldn't have found Polyphia if it hadn't been for their collaborating with it. But now, they're great. They're not Japanese, but they're great. And Avatar also. Avatar opened for baby metal, and I saw them, and their show is insane. It's great.
Also musical theater.
Yeah.
All right, I have a little bit of business to conduct. We are collecting for the Dragon Con charity, which this year is Big Brothers Big Sisters of Metro Atlanta. If you're interested in making a donation, you can either go online to text your donation, or you can drop some cash in the bucket at the back of the room on your way out. If you would like a sticker, we have stickers here. I think we're going to let the guys get their masks back on before anybody comes up for stickers, and then we can go ahead and start working our way towards the next one. Thank you for coming out.
Thanks, everybody. This was so awesome. Can I take a picture of everybody before they get up? Because nobody will believe me.
Look at how many baby
Look at how many people showed up. Okay. Right here.
Kitsune.
Kitsune's up. Thank you.